more audio check just to make sure I'm not echoing. All right.
Whatever it says.
All right. I believe we're on air. All right, hey everyone. Welcome to day one of the Genesis camp, specifically the developer talk. Let's see, there's a little bit of echo. All right. So let's go ahead and get kicked off here. Still sounds like it's muting a little bit, or echoing. All right, so I'm gonna get started with introductions. All right, sounds good now. My name is Dylan Ryan. I work at DWP Valet. We do enterprise support and custom development as well. My current role there is a developer and a junior developer and tier 2 support. So I'm going to go ahead and go down the list and let everyone else introduce themselves. So we'll just go in order down here. Alain, if you want to go ahead and kick us off. You got to unmute yourself first.
Yes, my name is Alain Schlesser. I'm only recently been specializing on WordPress development, and I've been doing all sorts of development with many languages and platforms before, but it's been about 2 years since I've been specializing in WordPress, and I started a site on brightnucleus.com where I try to offer my services.
That's awesome. Appreciate it. Christopher, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so my name is Christopher Cochran. I've been working with Genesis now since early beta, and with WordPress for almost 8 years now. I just work on many different projects and just really enjoy working with Genesis and making the web a better place, one website at a time.
Don't we all? Appreciate that, man. All right, Jesse?
I'm Jesse Peterson. I've been working with Genesis since about 3 to 6 months after it came out. I run Peterson Media Group, and I got tired of wearing all of those hats, so I went ahead and started working very closely with the WP Valet, with Mason James and Dylan here, and we've been taking on some bigger projects that way and really trying to work on our workflow to bring the best product possible.
Absolutely. Appreciate that. Joe, do you want to go next? You might have to unmute yourself first. No, we can't hear you yet, buddy.
Now?
Yes. Oh,
All right.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Cool. Hey guys, my name is Joe Dooley. I'm the lead developer at the Crush Agency. It's a full-service marketing agency here in Tampa. I've been working with Genesis since I really got started with WordPress. I was lucky. I didn't have to fall like a lot of other people did, so it's one of the better things. But since then, been a full-blown Genesis development agency for the past 2 years.
Sweet, very cool. All right, Wes, you want to follow up?
Sure. My name is Wes Linda. I have 2 jobs. I have full-time jobs at Johns Hopkins, and then university where I do web and creative and design and whatnot. All of the stuff I build there is on Genesis, and then I have my own freelance business running working with small business clients globally, I would guess. And all Genesis, I started in the, I guess, the pre-Genesis world. The first theme I ever bought was Brian's Revolution theme, and have kind of stuck in that realm ever since.
Sweet, thanks. Appreciate that. All right, cool. So we're going to go ahead and just jump right into the discussion real quick. I wanted to kind of break the ice by finding out, for the viewers who are going to be watching this later, why are workflows important, and what kind of leads developers towards good workflows. So the best way to explain that is to describe probably the worst thing that's happened to you personally. Just a quick, 60 seconds, like I lost, 60,000 products or something out of a database or something like that. Just something quick that might have happened to you because, you might have been younger, less experienced, didn't think a workflow was important, didn't know what it was. Just to kind of show the purpose of, why developers use workflows today. So we can probably just go straight down the list again if you want, if that just keeps things simple. Alain, if you want to start off. What's the worst thing that may have happened to you? It might not be terrible, but something that might have happened, a hiccup or a slip up because you were younger, didn't have a workflow in place.
I've worked for 10 years for the government in Luxembourg, and there were never any workflows in place there. It was all coding in Excel and VBA, and I think the worst thing was doing an update to an Excel table that managed to kill the system that paid the salaries for the prisoners.
Oh man.
For more than 3 weeks. So that was something with quite a lot of consequences. I tried to simulate workflow inside of Excel after that.
Yeah, that's definitely not good. All right, yeah, they definitely should have had a place or some sort of process in place for testing their updates on maybe another computer, something like that. But yeah, that's a good example. I appreciate that. Christopher, do you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I haven't done anything like mess up payments for anyone, but
That's good.
Related to workflow, probably. I mean, I've done a lot of mistakes not related to workflow, but probably related to workflow is when I first started working with the team. And actually, this team was the first time we were all working together on a really large project that we had really no real workflow, no really system of what was going on when and where and who was working on what. And it was just a constant overwriting of files.
Right.
And one day there was just this huge piece of the project that I ended up writing, and I checked it in, and then shortly after that, and I had no local backup because we're crazy then too. Everyone was cowboys.
Right.
Someone else pushed out an update and completely wiped almost a week's worth of code. I mean, it's my fault for not really keeping anything, but after that, definitely we at the time it was Dreamweaver. We started using the checkout system in Dreamweaver, really just to lock down files and things and smaller, quicker commits for sure.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good example. I appreciate that. All right. Jesse?
I was probably 3 to 6 months into working my own company, and someone called in a panic and they needed some work done on their site. And it was a really simple fix. And I was cowboy coding. I was working on a live site. And I ended up needing to just re-upload WordPress. And so I FTP'd stuff up there, and I overwrote the default theme because it is included in the upload. They spent $6,000 on a custom theme, and it was in the default folder. So I overwrote their entire modification. They had no backups. They were on shared hosting. I had no backup because I didn't think about making a backup first.
Yeah.
And that project ended rather abruptly and not very nicely, and I was surprised I didn't lose my house. So that was a rough start to the business, and I've never made such a mistake before, and now I at least download everything on the server
Yeah.
before I start, and I get a database backup. If they don't have something in place, I get my own copy now.
Yeah,
So
that's definitely.
I use manage WP and just make a real quick snapshot no matter what I do.
Yeah. That's definitely good advice for someone who is just starting to ramp up and bring on more clients. You see it a lot of freelancers. They just dive into the site and they want to fix the problem. But yeah, make sure you take backups first thing. Do your due diligence so that you don't get bit by something like that. That's good advice. Joe, do you want to follow up?
So, I don't really have any horror stories for, development workflows and things like that. I will tell you this, the more I develop and, take this on as a full-time career, the less I want to recreate wheels. So, just not having the development workflow in place for probably the first, year and a half of my development career. I mean, that's a lot of code out there that, I could still have saved in my, my GitHub repo that I could be using on websites today. So, development workflows are vital. They really are.
Yep. So you were saying one thing that you probably didn't do was, or the one thing you did do that you liked was take notes. And that's one thing that I've been doing too is everything everything Jesse shows me or any of the other developers at WP Valet, I just create a quick gist in GitHub and just save it there, and I can go back and look it up. So yeah, I definitely recommend that to any rising developers. Wes, you want to follow up?
What's a workflow? Just kidding. I mean, I think so. From my perspective, I work alone a lot, right? So I think the biggest, I don't have like this catastrophic, I didn't make people's payroll event or something like that, or I lost a site that was $6,000 or anything like that. But I think the biggest thing for me with workflow is to be able to meet a timeline. I think a lot of the times, if I don't have a workflow or a checklist of what needs to get done, a lot of times I'll miss something or I'll forget something, and and then you get to that 11:59 when something's supposed to be ready, and it's like, oh crap, and you've got to kind of run around and code all night hoping that you can meet the deadline and whatnot because you didn't have a good plan and flow in place. And so I think that's from my perspective, that's probably the biggest lesson is making sure that you have it written down somewhere or outlined somewhere what you're actually supposed to be doing, and then making sure that you're sticking that so that you can meet deadlines and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so yeah, so you can see based on all the developers' experience here, some people have terrible experiences without having, like Wes said, a defined set of guidelines to follow to get your product pushed out the door. Without that, you might run into some terrible things that could possibly happen. So different developers have different workflows, and like you said, that was a good question. What is a workflow? So essentially, for everyone watching, your workflow is a set of tools that you use to help you get from point A to point B, whether that be an IDE, some task runners like Grunt or Gulp, any CSS preprocessors. We're going to touch base on those things a little bit right now. So a lot of that stuff can be controlled through your IDE or via the command line. So there are some pretty powerful IDEs out there. There's some pretty heavy ones. There's some pretty lightweight ones. Some developers choose one over the other. Personally, my favorite IDE is Phpstorm because I can hook up deployment. I can hook up version control. I can follow all that stuff right there within the IDE. So my question to you guys is, since that's usually where most developers are going to start because that's where they're writing the code, I'd like to go ahead and jump to that point. obviously you're going to have a different IDE that you use now from when you first started. So that might be because, you found out another piece to your workflow needed to be done. Like now you need to process your SAS files into CSS files. So I wanted to go over and see what everyone's favorite IDE was today. You can touch base on, what you used to use and, how this new IDE is better. What's your favorite one and why? We'll just go in order again. If Alain, you want to go ahead.
Yes. In the corporate world, when I did all sorts of development on Microsoft platforms, I always used Visual Studio, which was great for the task. But now with WordPress development, I don't really use an IDE, but rather a text editor. I use Sublime Text 3. It's a bit more than a regular text editor. It's between text editor and IDE actually.
Yeah.
You can do debugging inside of it. You can run your build tools, but I mostly use it as a real text editor and do a lot of stuff in command line.
Yeah. So specifically,
this to be faster for me.
Yeah. And that's the main reason most people use Sublime, is because it is a little bit quicker than a full-blown IDE. It does fall between IDE and text editor. So specifically for your workflow, what kind of packages do you use for Sublime for your workflow?
I have a lot of packages that show me all sorts of indicators inside the text. To show me what has changed for my Git repository, to show me what coding standards I'm currently not respecting, things like that. I do use an FTP plugin that allows me to quickly upload single files or entire folders to a server, but that is more of a quick hack for small projects to get them to work. For a large project, that would probably be not the best workflow. But it's very useful if you have a small site where you want to do quick fixes. You can pull the entire site down, do your fixes, and then do a sync over FTP directly from Sublime Text.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. It looks like Andrea or Andre in the chat saying nobody uses Atom. So I'm curious, do any of the developers here use Atom as their text editor? I see head shaking. Looks like no one uses it. Sorry, I have both.
I tried it and I didn't like it, so I will say I did try it.
Yeah, I have both. I'm still more of a Sublime and Phpstorm fan. Like you were saying, for minor edits, I definitely roll with Sublime. But for projects, I definitely use Phpstorm. What about for you, Christopher?
Yeah, so I actually don't even really use anything as sophisticated as even Sublime. I'm currently using just regular pen and paper, scan it into the computer, and then just run a text compiler over that, and then that generates my code. No.
I was about to say, like, Wes is laughing, like, is this a
joke? Actually, I really don't use anything much advanced. I use BBEdit, and it's mostly just because when I first started, I used Text Wrangler. It was free. And I've just been so accustomed to it, and I haven't had the time really to sit down and really learn any of these new programs and use them as efficiently as I am currently, just with my, BBEdit and a couple of the extra tools and command line. So with a combination of command line and a few extra tools, it's just what I'm so used to. It's hard to kind of try out Sublime or even some of these IDEs. Though I do have them installed, and they are great for stepping through PHP, like when I'm trying to debug something. But that's the really only time if I'm like banging my head and having bruises.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That's kind of how we work at WP Valet too. Our developers will use Phpstorm to step through the code if we need to see exactly what's going on. But yeah, keep it lightweight. That's good
Yeah.
advice. What about for you, Jesse?
I got Phpstorm about a year and a half ago and got extremely confused by it, so I added a few more things to Sublime Text. Is my volume better now, guys?
Yes, sounds
Okay.
good to me.
So I've been using Sublime Text for years, and then I started getting a little deeper into PHP functions that weren't quite working right, and I put it into Phpstorm, and I was seeing that some things would turn gray and they weren't being used. I was like, this variable's not being used,
Mm-hmm.
and I found safe delete and things like that, and I was like, okay, now I'm sold. So I got a license to Phpstorm. I've modified my layout to where I can do my Sass up in the top, and I have my PHP down at the bottom, and I can have my variables over on the right in the bottom. And I just found it to be a very optimized layout for me. So I like it a lot, and I'm sure I'm not using a quarter of it.
Right, yeah. All right, cool. Jed, did you want to go next?
Yeah.
Oh, I think I muted you. Sorry. Unmute. It was echoing a little bit.
So I use Sublime Text 3. I mess around with Phpstorm every now and then. I guess I'm at that point right now in my career where I'm trying to make the conversion to Phpstorm, but Sublime Text 3 is just too easy. It works too well. I use a lot of plugins for Sublime.
Right.
One that I'm hooked on right now is it's called HeyoGist, and basically just right-click and you can create gist from Sublime. Pull it in too. Can't beat that. Also have coding standards, PHP code sniffer set up in there. What else? Sublime linter. I pull in terminal through Sublime. So I'm pretty big with Sublime.
There you go. Nice.
Look forward to those emails.
All right, let's see. Wes, what about you? I'm kind of curious what you use.
So I guess I might as well let the cat out of the bag. So my world does not revolve around pure development. So between my day job and my freelance business, I do design, I do photography, I do video, I do development, I do build websites, I help with hosting, like, and all of these different things. So my world is all Adobe. So, and I'm sure that I'll get hammered for it, but realistically, I do a lot of my development inside of Dreamweaver, similar to the world that you might use with Sublime Text and whatnot. But it's just I've used it for years, and I'm just comfortable there, and I don't have, I guess, like the free time to go out and necessarily learn something new, even though it realistically would probably save me time in some long realm. But the key is I don't spend 40 or 50 hours a week doing development. I'm kind of all over the board, and I like how Creative Cloud works, in that kind of all of my tools work together, and it's one platform, and everything kind of works the same. So I spend most of my time when I'm building something in Dreamweaver.
Okay, all right. Yeah, there's a couple Dreamweaver fans in the chat too. Let's see. I'm gonna go through the chat real quick and get everyone caught up. Somebody asked, "Do you still need PHP?" Oh, yeah. Do you still need Phpstorm if you're using Sublime Text 3? Personally, I would say no. If Sublime Text 3 is doing what you need it to do, stick with it. Let's see. Does anyone use Eclipse? Not. It doesn't sound like a whole lot of people here are using Eclipse. From my understanding, it does, Java development very well. I've never used it for PHP. Somebody else here might have. Then someone mentioned Phpstorm is free for open source projects. So that's definitely good for anyone that wants to try to get a hand on Phpstorm. You can test it out. I'm not sure exactly what that application process looks like, but I know currently I'm a student at NC State University here in North Carolina, and I just had to sign in with my NCSU ID, and I was able to get the student discount. So if there's any students in there, just you can get a really big discount on that. Let's see, is there anything else? No, that's it. So we can go ahead and move on. Task runners, I'd like to cover a little bit. How many of you guys are using task runners? I know there's a few out there. There's Grunt and Gulp. Which ones are you using and why? So I'd like to go ahead and this shouldn't take very long. We'll just touch base on if you're using a task runner or not. What kind of what are the big tasks that you're using it for? Are you using it for just pre-processing it, or do you have some pretty advanced tasks set up for your task runner to do? Alain, do you want to go first?
Yes. I'm using Gulp. I've found it to benefit my needs than Grunt, which is more prevalent in WordPress development. I use it for much of anything that I can think of, not only as a pre-processing tool, but I use it to generate diagrams of my classes. I use it to do deployment. Yeah, pretty much anything that I can get into Node.js modules.
Yeah, thanks for that. It looks like the chat. I'll clarify what task runners are real quick. So task runner is like it's a JavaScript-based like automation scripts that do things like push files. It's basically just like a simple JSON file that you can set up. I posted some links in the chat if you guys are interested in reading a little bit more about exactly what they're used for. And some good examples are going to be in there as well. All right, so we can go to Christopher now. Oh, Chris, do you use task runners?
I need one to unmute myself. I do use task runners. I try and offload as much as I can to task runners. So like mostly minifying or like compression of images and things along that lines. But I also use it for generating specific style sheets, just to try and keep everything really light. So I'll have it go through and create specific style sheets that compile just for the home page or just for something else that I know that I don't want to load it to, like it just has too much extra CSS. So I write custom rules like that. And then mostly just for like SVGs and different type of older support for some browsers or just some tasks that kind of clean up that way, and linting.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I forgot to mention linting, minification, and the image optimization. Those were great examples. So are you more Grunt or Gulp?
I just recently, the latest project I'm using is using Gulp. I'm just more familiar with Grunt, but I'm liking Gulp. It seems a little bit faster, but I'm finding a lot of plugins kind of still buggy, but it's been getting better. So.
Yeah. From my understanding, it's the new kid on the block, but it seems like it's easier. The reason it's picking up such a audience is because of the JSON files are a little bit easier to read. The configurations are a little bit easier to set up. I know for me, when I was learning it, I started off with Grunt, and as soon as I saw Gulp, I switched immediately because it was just so much easier to write out the configurations. I didn't want to have to spend time. What about you, Jesse? I know you're a big fan of Sass, so you must love having these scripts compile your Sass into CSS for you.
I just started Sass right before I did the workflow course. So I started using Sass in December, but I took a course that really got me up to speed really quick, and I buried myself in it. So I just 5 days ago converted from CodeKit to Grunt and got some help with my file, and I'm currently running clean, Sass, auto prefixer, ugliify, and watch. That's it. And it's doing what I wanted to do, what CodeKit was doing for me. I'm a big fan. I am also doing the map files, the source map, and that I heard is a good thing. So that's how new I am. But I'm gonna start doing Gulp next week. So woohoo!
Map files are awesome when you're really using them. If you're like having trouble trying to find that specific like style on a big project. So
Yeah, I like printing the line numbers. I found that out very quickly when I compiled. I was like, what file is this error occurring in?
Very nice. Does your treehouse course cover that? I know you have
Does it cover Grunt? No.
no? Okay.
Because there are other courses, just pile them on, bro. Put them in the
Yeah.
library.
Yeah, that's where I get most of my information from is treehouse.
Yeah.
What about for you, Joe?
So yeah, I definitely use Grunt. I use Composer as well. I know that's dependency management, but honestly, I've been trying to get away from Grunt, and I've been moving into Post CSS. I don't know if any of you guys have started hopping on that yet, but it's just another beast. But yeah, I mean, task automation can't beat it. It's gonna take care of your images, optimize them, concatenate, live updates, auto prefixer. It's a big time saver. Jesus, I don't know what I'd do without it, especially a year ago. Yeah.
Cool. So I went ahead and did a quick Google on that, so I could let the chat know that there's another new kid on the block. I'm definitely gonna look into that, see what it's got. Thanks for the share. Wes, you want to go next? I know you said you don't do a lot of heavy development, but are you familiar with Grunt and Gulp? Have you played with either of them? Do you have a preference?
So I haven't toyed with them. Again, I had 4 kids. They run all of my tasks. I put them to work, but no, it's something that I have it on my. I'm hopeful. I'm probably going to try and take like a week or 2 this summer and just live on Treehouse and kind of bring myself up to speed on a lot of this. But it's with the percentage of my day that is actually development. I haven't jumped into any of them yet to be able to give a good feedback.
Absolutely, that makes sense. Sometimes tools just don't make sense in your workflow, and that's definitely a good example of that. Let's see. So we have a few questions coming in on the chat that I wanted to cover real quick so we can just stay up to date. Someone's asking Tara Clays is asking how to bring an existing live site into version control. It sounds like she's using SourceTree and Bitbucket, and she wants to know what else does she need. So I know specifically, because I've worked with Jesse, that he uses SourceTree. Is that right, Jesse?
Yeah, I use SourceTree because I use Bitbucket, and they were made to work for each other. They're from the same company. And I use Bitbucket because of the free repos. And I am too cheap to spend $7 a month for 5 private repos. I just not going to do it yet.
Right, I agree. So did you want to go over kind of what your workflow, like if you were to do that, how would you approach? What would be your first step in getting a live site into version control using SourceTree?
The live site I would slurp using managed WP, so it would take a database backup and a full backup of all the files, and then I use desktop server for local, so I would spin up a new server, a new install using that SQL and those files, and then I would drop in a git ignore into the root file, into the root folder for that install, and at that point I would pick whether or not I'm just interested in the theme or I'm interested in pretty much everything in WP content, and then I would initialize git, and it will make it according to the git ignore file. And then I go to Bitbucket, I create a repository, and I tell SourceTree that the remote is Bitbucket. It's a little complicated to do it the first time, but once you do it once or twice, it gets really quick. Your remote is Bitbucket, and then you are actually going to push to remote because it's already local. that's how that
Right.
works.
That makes sense. Yeah, appreciate that. Thanks for answering that question.
No problem, Bob.
I'm just going to catch up on the chat real quick. And for everyone watching this right now live, we do have a few polls that have been spun up. If you take a look down at right underneath the video, you can see we have which IDE and editor do you choose. That one's getting a lot of love. Sublime is killing it. If you look at task runners, it looks like Grunt is winning. If you have any questions that you want me to cover during the talk, you can just add them down at the bottom underneath where it says questions and topics, and I'll do my best to squeeze those in. I'm looking at the chat right now. Jesse mentioned desktop server, and it looks like Marjorie shared a 20% off code in there. If you use code Genesis Camp, you can get 20% off of your server, off of your desktop server key, which is awesome. After me and Jesse talked about desktop server, I use that for my local environments all the time now, which I guess would be a good segue into spinning up a client site on your local desktop. I know when I was first learning development is something that I kind of struggled with. So any tools that could make that easier, I was thirsty for. I was looking for those to make client sites on my local drive easier. What kind of advice, what kind of tools do you guys have to help that process out? Alain, do you want to kick us off?
Yes, I use Vagrant for my live sites together with a system called VVV that enables you to quickly create new WordPress sites. You can choose which WordPress version you use. You can with another small script, you can create the sites, for example, so that your upload folder gets proxied to the live site, so that when you have your local copy, you only need the source code, not the 1,000 gigabytes of images. And it also allows you to deploy the Vagrant machine to, for example, a DigitalOcean server, if you want to have a quick online version of a specific Vagrant machine that you have created.
Yeah, that's very cool. That's something that I'm kind of working with right now, as I'm kind of working on trying to get switched over to Vagrant. And I feel like there's a lot of developers that are at the point where I'm at right now, where you might be using desktop server or something, but you're just barely getting by, getting these environments spun up locally. So I agree. Vagrant is definitely a good tool to look at to get some sites spun up in a nice little local environment. I wasn't aware that you could have those pushed out to DigitalOcean. That's awesome. So that's definitely some research that I would have to put in. So I'm guessing, do you have any resources that you recommend for people who would like to learn how to do that? If so, you can just drop a link if you find one in the chat for the Genesis Camp. All right, so we can go ahead and move on. So Chris, what do you use for getting everything up and running on your local environment?
So yeah, I'm a big Vagrant user as well. VVV is great, even Puppet and things like that. Before Vagrant, I was really big into like MAMP, and then kind of like Vagrant just came out, and just being able to have that extra control was just amazing, because I can spin up boxes that mimic almost exactly the server that I'm going to be sending my code to. So I know, there really will be no issue that I wrote the code in PHP 5.6 or something, and there's something in there that won't work on 5.5, and I find out just as I move it to the server. So it's really great to be able to completely have everything running, and then just have all your Grunt tools and all your task runners built into the server, so you're not messing up your computer all into Vagrant as well. So I can try out a new tool and not worry about it taking over my computer, and breaking something, or having the latest beta like I'm running now on my Mac, and a lot of things broke, but everything inside my Vagrant is still working perfectly, because it's its own little server. So.
Yeah, absolutely. This is going to be a good segue into Jesse, because Jesse's kind of the one who got me hooked on desktop server, but I've been secretly looking into VVV on my own. So yeah, the one benefit, a lot of people are saying that they had troubles getting Vagrant up and running. There are a few like known issues for some people getting stuff up and running. Like I've played with WordMove before too, and they're like, you got to like keep tripping over these same errors and stuff. But surprisingly for me, Vagrant just followed the steps on their GitHub repo, and everything worked. But yeah, the main benefit seems like it's more reflective of a production environment, since it isn't just your local computer. So moving into Jesse, he mentioned the PHP versions can sometimes cause conflicts if you're working locally and then pushing to production. So I know that you like desktop server, so did you want to go ahead and touch on that and stick up for him?
Sure. Desktop server pretty much saved my bacon. I was dealing with having to get into a course in the workflow at multiple points. If I messed up, I had to be able to roll back. Well, once you install Genesis in an install, things are permanently changed, and I had to be able to roll back. And I found out about export and the import and going deploy to live, and I was just sold on it. I also remembered something about someone saying you start up Vagrant and you go get a cup of coffee or make a ham sandwich, and I didn't see that with desktop server. Even the free version, I was like, it's up in 4 to 5 seconds. Why does it take so long with Vagrant? And I could not get Vagrant to work on my 2008 MacBook at all. I tried for 3 days, and that made me enough to be mad. And so I threw $100 at desktop server, and I said, take my money now. And I use it every single day. I use it on both my computers. It is running all of the time. It only uses about 500 megabytes or less. What I like about it most is that I'm going to do a little sneak preview here. The new one is actually built on WordPress, so you're actually in a WordPress environment to make new sites and export. It kind of looks like the plugins page, and there are plugins for it. So if you find something that desktop server doesn't do, write a plugin and make it better. And it's just, the support is awesome. I know Mark personally, and he goes to WordCamps all the time. So if you haven't met Mark at a WordCamp, meet him. He's great. And I think they still have shot glasses, maybe. Did you have any follow-up questions I didn't touch on? I'm looking in chat. I don't see anything.
Yeah, I was reading over chat too, trying to follow up. Yeah, someone's saying that Vagrant on Windows is not easy, and it requires a lot of resources. I agree. That was the main reason I chose desktop server in my Windows environment.
Windows just isn't friendly because of the whole // thing.
Right. And yeah, you said you had a sneak preview on the beta for desktop server. All those plugin developers out there heard it from Jesse. He secretly told you guys that you can hook into desktop server's new version. So start thinking about ways you can extend it, play around with it, break it and hack it, do whatever you got to do.
Every host is going to be in on this to make it work for live deploys, because live deploys is the big thing. If you want to push it from local and get it live for your client, you don't want to have a headache.
Yeah, you know that plugin that we were kind of talking about, we posted in WP Valley Hip Chat earlier, was we were looking at the WP Engine plugin that you install on your site, and it helps you migrate to their environment easier. Imagine something like that for desktop server. You have a WP Engine plugin, you have a Bluehost plugin, and you just migrate your local site out, you know? think about the possibilities with desktop server. It sounds like it's definitely going somewhere.
Yes.
Awesome, cool. So Joe, what about you?
So I'm a little different than you guys. I use Pantheon. Uh, Pantheon, it's a enterprise cloud-based hosting company. The nice thing about it is it's free for developers, so there's really no sense that you shouldn't be using it. What Pantheon enables me to do is, aside from taking on twice the amount of business that I used to be able to take on, it's I create a site with Pantheon, I spin up a new site, and it's going to be created in their cloud environment. And immediately that site's going to be given 3 different environments. You have your dev, you have a test, and you have a live server. And all 3 of these environments are going to be connected by Git. And if you don't know Git, then you could still use something called SFTP mode, which is just essentially Pantheon behind the scenes. They track your changes into version control for you. So yeah, Pantheon's changed my life. I used to use desktop server and all that nonsense, and you couldn't pay me to go back to that after going to Pantheon.
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen some awesome things coming out of the Pantheon team. At WP Valet, we're actually working on migrating all of our staging sites over there because of that 3-tiered process that you were talking about. You have your dev, test, and production, and you even have the multi-dev too. And that's what we've been playing around with for some internal tools, is having each developer have their own environment, and then you can merge all of those together into dev, and then push all your file changes upstream, and then on production you keep your database, and then move all your database changes downstream. It's definitely a beautiful process to watch, but yeah, I recommend them too.
Have you tried the WP CFM plugin that goes well with Pantheon?
Yeah, that's what we've actually been using to do the database changes. I'm not a master with it yet, but our senior developer has been really pushing that, and it's looking pretty powerful. But it is definitely an enterprise resource. But yeah, I recommend them.
Pantheon is no joke.
Yeah.
And they do have a free account for agencies for anyone who's interested, and I don't work there.
Yeah. That's awesome. I appreciate that. All right, Wes, do you want to finish us up?
Sure. So, again, I guess I don't know how many cats I'm going to let out of the bag to reference Carrie over there, but I don't work local dev. My world, between my day job and my freelance, I will work across 3 machines. So I have a 27-inch iMac at the office. I have my laptop, and then I have an Alienware desktop that I like to work at home that has multiple monitors and all that stuff. So I have been hosting with Storm on Demand for quite some time, and utilizing I know everyone's going to hate this too, but utilizing a cPanel setup. And so generally when I bring a client up, I'll either spin up a subdomain under one of mine, or I'll put their own development domain or something on that server and work with it there. So I don't really run into the screwing up something else in another dev piece that I might be working on with local tools or whatnot, but it allows me all files I keep kind of loaded within Dropbox and whatnot, so they sync across all of those machines. So whichever one of my computers that I am needing to work at, I always kind of have all of my stuff right in front of me. So it's a different workflow, I think, than someone that might be sitting in one spot and they're a developer and they have a primary machine and that's what they're working with. But because of where I work and how I work, I have 3 machines, and so I like to have all of my files sitting on all of them, and I think that might be a little challenging with something like desktop server, although I did purchase it in the last couple of weeks. I just haven't taken the time to sit down and set it up and toy with it. I do want to, it's something I want to get into, but I typically dev out on my server, and I'll set up a development subdomain or something for clients to build out on, and then move it over when it once it's ready to roll.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So just gonna read over chat one more time to see if we have any questions. All right, we have some more questions coming in. Let's see. We have about 10 more minutes left, so I'm just gonna finish up with questions, so that way everyone can get what they want to out of this discussion, that actually took the time to show up. Let's see. So Tara has a follow-up question for the source tree and Bitbucket. She asks, so once in Bitbucket, how do you connect back to the live site? Do you version control the database too? I can actually start off with the kind of answer for that, and then Jesse can probably finish up. So normally your files go upstream. I was kind of talking about this with how Pantheon does it. So your files go from local to staging to production. So you could do that in version control. And then you want your database stuff to go from production down into your local. But Jesse can kind of talk a little bit more about how exactly his process is for doing that.
We'll just say the uncomfortable thing that databases are uncomfortable, especially when you're dealing with a client who is live blogging while you're doing work, or 2 months after you launch, the client wants some changes. You have to pull it down and you overwrite your local and you start over. And if it takes you 2 weeks to do your work, you don't push the database back up. Now you could use some tools like DB Migrate Pro to maybe do some selective stuff. We just work quickly and make database changes as we need. And it's also okay to spin up a new site and just point the DNS over there. Have these open discussions with your client about what may or may not happen and what to expect. And a lot of people are okay with a lot of different things. With databases will go wrong if the process takes too long.
Right. Yeah, like you were saying, sometimes clients will go in there changing widgets, pushing new content. And one thing, what looks like Wes has had that experience. One thing that I know that me and Jesse used, we played around with, was WordMove. That was actually posted in the chat up there a little bit ago. WordMove helps you move the database around without too much hassle. I know personally it was kind of difficult for me to get that working. You also mentioned WP Migrate DB Pro. Those guys are awesome. They were at WordCamp Miami too. They make that process a lot easier. So I would definitely look into that. Does anybody else have any useful tips for moving DBs around? Because I know that is definitely something that beginners struggle with, and not so much beginners.
What about version press? Has anyone tried that yet?
Version press? No, I've never used that.
So version press, it enables you to basically merge databases. So you're not going to be overwriting anything. Basically, it's going to convert your database changes into code, and then it commits it to version control, very similar to WP CFM plugin. And then it's going to basically read that JSON code and then convert that back into MySQL tables when you're pushing from environment to environment. So
that sounds cool.
Yeah, it's very similar. Version press gives you the functionality that Pantheon gives you, actually, in a plugin. It is new. It's not even at 1.0 yet. So, a lot of hosting providers, it's not going to work right away on their platform because there are a lot of requirements for it. But keep an eye out for that one. It's gonna do something good.
Nice, thanks. Chris, did you want to add something?
No, I was just saying how awesome that sounds. I mean, like Jesse was saying, databases are just always an annoyance. Some things I've done in the past is if the sites are on the same server, just because I always have issues with images and I don't want to always migrate them back is I've actually set up some sites to share the same image folder, but I just so the desktop, production and staging share the same image folder, so that way I never have to worry about rebacking up images to staging. But like the actual posts and stuff, it's just when I start working, I take a backup, and before I'm about to push out, I take another backup and just double check, really.
Yeah. So we have a few more questions to go over real quick. Since we only got 5 more minutes, we'll just get those knocked out real quick. It looks like I'm not really sure how to pronounce that. If it's Andrea or Andre. He was asking about the difference between desktop server and Vagrant. We touched on this a little bit earlier, so I can just recap him for that. Vagrant is more production-like, meaning that you can tweak the settings, like if they're sitting in front of Nginx or if they have a middle layer of caching or something like that, that you can mimic the production environment more accurately. So any changes that you make, you can be more confident that it's not going to bring the site down because the PHP version or something silly was different. And desktop server is more of a like cookie cutter. You can spin it up real quick, have it ready to go, change your files, and push them out. Looks like someone asked, VVV is much more complicated compared to desktop server. I agree. It is a little bit more complicated and is for more people that are command line savvy. So if you play around with desktop server and that fits your workflow, I would just recommend whatever works for you. Everybody has their different opinion. As you've seen, all the developers here have their own workflow that works for them. So just like every other developer does growing up, you just pull in pieces, test out new things, swap them out if they work better. So this is kind of just to give you guys a view of what other developers do and give you some tools that are out there that you can probably test in your workflow, see if it works out. If it doesn't, you can try varying vagrants. If it doesn't work out for you, you don't have to use it. But that is the advantage of it. And it would be hard to understand unless you're in that situation where Vagrant or where a PHP version or something might cause your code to not work on production. Yeah, and Alain is answering in chat right there. I appreciate that. If you guys want to discuss that, we can definitely have a little discussion on that real quick if you want. Or hold your peace. That's cool. Last question is Will Shattuck. He has a small shop of developers. There's only 3 of them. They're using mostly Dreamweaver text editors to make changes to their WordPress sites. How would a small shop like them benefit from task runners? So if one of you guys wants to talk about how task runners can help in a small environment, that would be cool.
I think a small environment is all the more reason to get your workflow down right and set some processes up for when you hopefully scale up your business. If you're a small team, it gives you time to tweak, try if you like Grunt, if you like Gulp, if you want to do post CSS, etc. You really get to test things out and see what works best for you and your team.
Yeah,
one quick thing to add to that too is, especially if you're a small team and looking to grow, having a workflow in place really helps the onboarding process for new developers coming onto your team. That way you can kind of just say, hey, this is how we do things, and then they can kind of fall into that, and that way there's just less questions, and you kind of just know exactly what's going to happen. And then with task runners too, you can always have the code compile a certain way, so you're not worried about everyone doing something specific. Though one thing I will say is if you're using version control with like minification, do not check in those minified files because you're just going to have headaches.
Right. Yeah. That's definitely a good tip. Yeah, make sure your get ignored does not include minified files. Yeah. All right. Did you want to lead us out? I believe we're out of time now, so.
Yeah, awesome panel, guys. I think I've got over 100 viewers at the moment live watching this, so appreciate Dylan for moderating this and everyone else for attending and sharing your thoughts. Really, really good. I just wanted to make the point too that if you don't know about the Genesis Slack channel, there's links that we can post that show you about that, and there is a workflow section in the Genesis Slack channel which is really good. So you'll find the guys that are on the panel today often in there talking about things. There's lots of other people in there also talking about things. So, you know, if you want to get more about this particular topic, that's a good place to hang out. So thanks again. Thanks you to everybody for coming along and being the first panel for the event. We do have to cut it off. We've got Troy Dean waiting out in the green room, ready to roll with the next session. So thank you.